I think there's one reason among several why it's difficult. And that is because standing in front of those two gates, as you stand at that crossroads, are false prophets doing everything they can in their power to push you the wrong way. They're there, obscuring the narrow gate and waving people on like some spiritual traffic cop to the broad road that leads to damnation. And so Jesus says, having given you the invitation, I'm going to have to warn you too. And that's where you come to verse 15. He must warn us of false prophets. And it says then, beware of false prophets. They stand at the midst of the crossroads, trying their best to obscure the narrow way and to push men on the broad way. And they succeed. Did you know that? Oh, yes, they succeed. Highly successful. In case you don't think so, go with me to the end of the broad way, when it all finally comes to an end, and you find that in verse 22. Many, and it's the same many in verse 13, the many that go in the broad way. The many who went in now come to the end, and they think they've arrived at heaven, and they say, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name, and in thy name have cast out demons, and in thy name done many wonderful works? We're the religious. And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me that work iniquity. It's the wrong road, folks. But many go in that way. Many. Many, many. Because there are false prophets pushing them that way. Jesus then, in effect, is saying this. As you strive to enter that narrow gate, beware of those who would mislead you. Now, in order to understand what he's really saying and unfold this passage, I want you to notice two words in our outline. First one is warning, and the second is watching. Let's look, first of all, at the key word warning. Verse 15. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are rapacious or ravenous or ravening wolves. Now, the Lord is very clear here. He doesn't leave any doubt in our minds about whom he is speaking. We know he is talking about false prophets. Now, this is not an uncommon thing in the Bible. For example, you go way back to the Pentateuch, penned under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit by Moses. And Moses has for us, in Deuteronomy, for example, chapter 13, God's instruction about false prophets in the earliest times of his redemptive history. Listen to what Deuteronomy 13 says. If there arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and giveth thee a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder come to pass, whereof he spoke unto thee, even if what he says comes to pass, and says, let us go after other gods, which thou hast not known, and let us serve them, thou shalt not hearken unto the words of that prophet, or that dreamer of dreams. For the Lord your God testeth you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. You shall walk after the Lord your God and fear him and keep his commandments and obey his voice. You shall serve him and cleave unto him. And that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he's spoken to turn you away from the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you. In other words, Moses told the people, when you find a false prophet, kill him. They're very serious. They're very deadly. In Isaiah chapter 30 and verse 10, it says, verse 9, this is a rebellious people. They are lying children, children who will not hear the word of the Lord. And they say to their prophets or seers, see not. And to the prophets, prophesy not unto us right things. Speak unto us smooth things. Prophesy deceits. Amazing. Isaiah says there will be people who want to prophesy these things, and there will be people who want them to do it. There's always a market for false prophets, because people don't want to hear the truth. They don't. And so there's always a hearing for the false prophets. Jeremiah repeatedly, again and again, starting in chapter 5 and running all the way to chapter 23, marks the false prophets. Warning after warning after warning after warning. And you come to the New Testament. And in the New Testament, Matthew chapter 24, for example, verse 11. And many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many. There's that many again. There are many false prophets who deceive many people, and many go on that road, and many wind up saying, Lord, Lord. And he says, I don't know any of you, many. I don't know any of you. But we have prophesied in thy name. And you see, the false prophets come to the same end that their dupes come to. They make their claim, but their claim does not stand. There shall be many false prophets, and they shall deceive many. Verse 24 of Matthew 24, for there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they would deceive the very elect. False Christ, pseudo-Christos. They try to present themselves as if they were Christ. Shams, phonies, and liars they are. And so the Bible warns us over and over and over about false prophets. They're going to be around. They always have been around. There have been many false prophets, and there shall be false prophets as long as we live on this earth till Jesus comes. They're going to be here. Now, I want you to think this through with me, so I want to give you 4 words that will explain the warning in verse 15. Number 1 is definition. Definition. And by this, I simply want to define for you the term false prophet. What is a false prophet? Who are we really dealing with in this verse? Let me back up from that. Ever since the fall of man, it is apparent that man is hopelessly lost. Man turns his back on God, runs from God. No man seeks God, Romans 3. Men run from God, and they run to hell as fast as they can. And there is no one among them who can turn them around, for man does not have in himself such a resource. And so God has to pick out certain people, redeem them, send them to mankind to draw man's heart back to God. These are his prophets. And you find in the Old Testament and the New that a true prophet was known by 2 things. He had a divine commission and he had a divine message. He was called by God and he was given his content by God. He gave God's message and he was God's man.